Good morning, everyone. I have with me here Zach Whitman, Chief Data Scientist and Chief AI Officer from GSA. Thank you so much for being here. I know there's a lot going on right now with AI and GSA and shifting priorities across the board, so really glad to sit down with you today.
Is there a lot going on?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe you can update
I
us
don't
on
know.
that.
So thank you for having me.
So with that change and some of the work that you're continuing to prioritize, new executive orders, I'm sure everyone's heard about those, and maybe you can dig into those here in a minute. What do these priorities look like for GSA? What are your top priorities for the year?
A year is a long time horizon. We've been compressing our horizons a little bit shorter. Things have been very dynamic recently, and I think what's great to see is a lot of the continuity in terms of themes that we've seen from the prior administration to the new administration when it comes to safety and transparency and ethical and responsible use of AI. We've seen ourselves in GSA as an enabler for the federal workforce, for the federal complex generally. We want to make sure that we are doing right by the other agencies in terms of looking at procurement, consolidating, making it easier, faster, more scalable kind of acquisitions. So we want to focus on ways in which we can empower other agencies to buy better, buy smarter, and buy more efficiently. Our goal also is in terms of empowering the workforce. So bringing down time to market to accessing industry-leading AI tooling. So one of the clarion calls we've heard from our administrator has been, we want to have the best-in-class tools for the staff, no matter what. And the idea of locking in with a single vendor just doesn't comport with that line of thinking. They want to have flexibility because how dynamic this space is, it's really important that we have the ability to switch between the best-in-class model for the best use case. And the variety of the use cases that we're seeing are huge. And so the ultimate goal for us is really about making sure that we can have access to the latest and the greatest wherever possible.
You said a few things in there, including empowering the workforce, having access to the right tools, the AI tooling. I know there's a lot of developments that have come out even just recently that show a lot of that. And it's great that we're all here, empowering the workforce in a way to see how they can best do that. So thinking through those things, how do you envision GSA's role moving forward across the broader federal landscape, considering some of these priorities?
I think we have to serve in part as a benchmark for what good acquisition looks like, what good deployment looks like, and make what we do available to others. So one initiative that we've been doing and we've been kind of leaning into a fair bit was making sure that we have a scalable platform that allows for a variety of different AI models and providers to have a seat at that table. And so what we've understood, especially as we've begun to roll that out to all of our employees, is that one, there's a huge appetite for that, but two, we're in a beginning phase where we're trying to mature through this kind of learning phase. And like the idea of spinning up a chatbot for everybody, right? This is one of the things that we tried to do because one, we believe it's a market norm at this point. Every workplace is going to have some sort of capability. We need to make sure that we're doing right by our employees and providing them with tools that they would be able to see in the commercial space or other agencies. But two, we understood that there is a shift in the type of thinking that happens when you give tools like this to people. They start to think in terms of processes a little bit more discreetly, where it's like, well, I was doing, this workflow, and if I break it down into these little chunks, I can ask this AI tool to do this one little part, and then that begets to like, oh, well, what if I wrote a script that does that for me? I don't have to do that, and what if I ask the AI to do that for me? And so we're seeing this cascade and this rapid maturation of the employee base to say like, okay, so if I have this tool in place, what would I use it for? And what we hear from other agency partners is similar behaviors. Either they've rolled out their own chatbot or they've rolled out other tools. They're seeing the behaviors of the employee in the workforce start to accommodate their workflows with these tools in place. And that's great. Our next step, though, is to start to think about like an AI native workflow, where in which you start the process with this tool in mind. And what would you change at that point to make it more efficient? So I think a big part of our effort is really to lead by example, to allow for other agencies to acquire this stuff, but then also build tools that others could use or that push the market into the space that we'd like it to go, which is one in where things are flexible, things are very transparent. We have full audit capabilities and things that are required of the federal workforce more specifically than the commercial market.
Considering some of the use cases for AI, and I know agencies are in various stages of documenting those or releasing those to the public, is there something that you heard from the community that really launched, like, wow, this use case is amazing? Was there an impetus or that moment at all that you can cite something that was just amazing that led to some of these priorities?
I don't know if it's a moment, but like one thing that comes to mind with that is the Department of Energy labs do a lot of really cool basic research, and one of them built their own LLM to help scientists, something that they use their own compute to do. They use their own scientists to build this thing. And what's very cool about the federal landscape is it's super diverse, filled with a lot of really smart, talented people, and those folks are really open to sharing. And so that's where the idea of fostering a community where we can share code, share models, share compute is something that's really burgeoning in our minds. Is how can we, as a one government ethos, really lean into that aspect of our scale, lean into the aspect of our talent, and maybe empower others from different agencies to use that LLM? How could we facilitate the use of that Department of Energy LLM for NASA or for education or for EPA? There's scientists in every single one of these major agencies, and they would all benefit from something like that. If there was like a little AI helper that could help scientists specifically, let's see if we can lean into that. And so that's where I think GSA needs to lean into that infrastructural role, where we allow for those bridges to occur, where it's safe to share data, safe to share the models, and safe to share the use cases in detail so that, one, we're transparent to the public, but two, we're generating new ideas for other feds who can browse and say like, oh, okay, so it's cool that energy's doing this. I wonder if I could reach out to them and get it, or collaborate. So I think like that connective tissue is really where we can start to lean into it.
That's actually a great segue into getting into more of that collaboration aspect. What role do you see? I mean, it's a pretty profound role that GSA would take in that sort of scenario. What about on the industry side? How do you see partnerships playing out in government AI efforts? Where do they fall into this conversation?
Yeah, I think this doesn't go anywhere without industry partners being willing and engaged to kind of lean into this. And I know that there's going to be a period of time where there are different routes that agencies could take. Agencies could be like, well, we just want to buy like a chatbot and kind of invest in things, and with that procurement would come additional models, and you can kind of scale up from there. But we also know a lot of agencies, one, have either built their own interfaces and need to be able to plug into things more dynamically and more programmatically. And so the idea of building a level playing field where any kind of foundation model house can submit their models to some sort of platform that could be rapidly procured by other agencies and then plugged into their different tools. I think that's where we'd like to see a lot more focus being, because it provides that flexibility, provides this dynamic marketplace where the right tool goes for the right use case, and these agencies aren't making accommodations or are like, well, I'd rather have this, but it's not available in this model garden, so I can't use it. I think we need to make sure that we're lowering the barrier of entry for this very dynamic space to blossom and to allow it to move into the federal marketplace more freely. A big complaint we hear is like, well, I'm a small organization. I can't invest, 6 months to a year's worth of time and resources to get into compliance, and it's just not on our roadmap. Those kind of like door closing conversations, we need to figure out how to at least crack a window on and begin to open those back up, because this space is very early and there's a lot of new players in the game that may not be thinking about selling to government. And I think if we continue that current posture and don't do anything to remove those barriers or to help those newcomers join and enter into this marketplace, we're doing a disservice to the public as well as our federal employees.
Where do you see the place that AI adoption has right now? I guess a lot of people say, especially in the federal context, it's so nascent still, but maybe compared to a year ago? How would you consider that now?
I think now, compared to like last year, it's grounded in a little bit more practicality. Folks are starting to get their hands on it. One thing that we found was we were early in allowing folks to use public tools for non-sensitive use cases so that they could get familiar with it, because we found that nothing was better than people having like hands-on practical uses of it. And with that, we saw, one, that there is, you know, a natural distribution of the types of users that are going to use this stuff, and it's not all going to be, you know, laggards, and it's not all early adopters. It's like any organization, there's a healthy distribution. But what we are seeing now is that people are starting to think about that next step outside of those transactional interfaces that are more kind of just understood in the common vernacular for these tools, and thinking about it more programmatically. How can I embed this in my program? How can I use this to then feed it into something else? And so they're naturally starting to form a vocabulary around this agentic space that's all coming forward. And it's exciting to see them kind of naturally discover that rather than us kind of pushing it and like them following a trend. And you know, I think that that's going to lead to a lot more organic solutions, ones that aren't quite so top-down prescribed. We want to get a win that shows that we're using agentic stuff. It'll be like, oh, an RPA team can start to use this, you know, LLM that we provided via an API to augment a current task. You know, why don't we feed that into another AI? And then why don't we feed it into another? And so they're just naturally reinventing that concept using the tools that they have. And so I think that maturity is really, really encouraging, and we'd like to see more of that.
Fantastic. I want to get into a little bit about the Chief AI Officer role. Maybe for those who aren't as familiar in the room, it's somewhat new. There's a lot of still moving parts there. But going back to the collaboration aspect, how does the role really, how is that bringing together the community and collaborating across government? What does that look like? Maybe start from the basics too for those who aren't as familiar.
Yeah, so the Chief AI Officer role was prescribed by EO 14110. It's been rescinded, but they've reintroduced it, so all's fair. The function was designed to try to keep track of the agency's use of AI, kind of enumerate the use cases, index them, and make sure that we are reporting to the public how we're using it. But we also need to be a change agent for the agency to start to push this technology into more normalized spaces. It's designed to be at like the kind of C-suite level, supposed to be in some way empowered, but not necessarily through like a defined role, but also it's usually tagged on to something else. So a lot of CDOs are chief AI officers, CIOs, that kind of thing, which I think is great because it immediately gives them a forum into the different meetings that we've been having. You know, we have a lot of these, you know, councils that in which we can all get together and, you know, swap war stories, talk about what we're doing. Sometimes those are very performative. Hey, you know, here's my success story, whatever. But sometimes it leads to organic conversations, usually after the meeting. And that's where we can start to have, you know, candid, hey, what are you doing with this? How did you do that? And it allows for this ability to kind of say, like, hey, we built something, and it allows for, you know, flexible model things. Oh, that's cool. We kind of did the same thing. Can we, you know, how did you do it? What did you do? What did you do for safety? How did you monitor the use of it? That kind of stuff. And it led to a real practical sense of like, oh, okay, so if you already built that code, can I just get it and then can we use it? And it's like, okay, but what's more sustainable? Can you just host it as a service? Conversations like that have really been kind of coming forward. And I'm really excited to see those councils get reinvigorated. You know, from the last one to last administration to this one, we're going to start to see a lot more of that coming together, and it's going to be exciting to see what can come out of this.
Any initial surprises?
It's a lot of the same faces, a lot of same friends, and I think we were all kind of chasing this point. I mean, the Kaios, I call them cows, and the White House hates it. They deserve it. It sounds like cows. The AIEO, you know, you got to do it. These folks are all, you know, kind of on board already. You know, like all of these folks are like, hey, we all have the similar problems. And I think like leaning into those similar problem spaces is really where we can make a lot of headway quickly. We all have back office issues. We all have like automation opportunities that we can do, and they all look the same. And that again pushes us to the center of like, did you already do this? Because I'd like to just do that. And we can learn from each other. So that's where that scale optimization really comes into play. We are so big, we have our hands in all sorts of different mission areas, but we also have a lot of commonalities, and we should just embrace that and use what we've already done at other places as efficiently as we can.
I want to look ahead into what's next on the horizon as you're starting to get your feet, well, you've been in the role for a while, but it's a new administration, new priorities.
Yeah.
So what's next on the horizon for AI at GSA?
I can't remember what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not. The upshot is we are looking to centralize procurement. That's a big one. How can we build a vehicle that would allow for any agency to quickly tap into it and begin to consume major services as quickly as possible, and also making sure that we are fostering that early adopter space for other organizations. Secondly, we are working on this GSAI concept, which is, again, a platform concept in which it provides a chatbot, it provides an API platform, and it provides an administration console, a way in which you can observe the safety and the evaluations of different models for different purposes. I'm really excited about that project because I think it has general application across other agencies, and it focuses on the quality aspect. So instead of focusing on only safety concerns, are we introducing biases? Is it teaching me how to disown my kids by providing legal advice, shady stuff like that? We are focusing on the quality of the performance of each model based on the specific function areas of the agency. So like procurement, for example, how good is a specific model at answering procurement questions? And we can start to graph that and watch it evaluate over time, especially for like model drift or new models as they come forward. These models perform differently across the different aspects of our different functional efforts, and having a quality measurement of its performance and then being able to understand what to do with that is really critical. We don't want to empower our workforce with a tool that's just giving random advice, and advice that is just not in line with the work that they're going to do. So by measuring it and being able to establish evaluations for GSA and then for other agencies as well, we can benchmark them and then identify, well, okay, so we need to augment this with like a RAG, or we need to fine tune it, or we need to do something to improve its quality. But at least we're having that open conversation to say, like, this is how good it is and this is what it's suitable for, versus kind of operating in the blind and just saying, like, buyer beware, you better double check your facts. And so like that step is really exciting. And then the secondary stuff from that would be, if we start to think about connecting it to our data stores, what happens then? And that's where that evaluation framework needs to be iron tight, so that we are not introducing possible misinformation coming from our data, but looking authoritative. So that is a really exciting piece of it.
It sounds like getting the data quality piece, of course, is, as many folks say, is always the most challenging. Would you say that as well?
Yeah, I'd also say that we want to use AI as like that kind of Trojan horse to backdoor metadata, boring metadata and data practices, as to push that to the forefront. There's no better way to demonstrate the quality or the lack thereof of your data stores by putting an AI engine in front of it and letting it hit its head against the wall. We have ignited a lot of conversations across the organization about, like, what can we do to improve our data stores? How can we make it better for AI consumption, and getting that AI readiness on top of really what is just getting your data ready and consumable for a human, which is an ironic little benefit of this, making your data legible, understandable, fully contextualizing it, making it mission-centric and function-aligned, building ontologies that align to the business questions that you're going to face are all good things to do no matter what engine you're putting in front of it, be that a human process or one that has some augmentation with AI. So this has been like a really nice silver lining, not even a silver lining, it's just nice to be able to have that conversation and just see the energy in the A-suite about, like, okay, we need to talk about metadata. I'm like, all right, here we go. This is actually what we should be doing. And so it's been a really nice little happy accident.
Very exciting stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of things here we'll get into in the roundtables later on. So thank you so much for joining us and talking this through.
Thank you for having me.